Hello, everyone. Welcome back. All right, we're going to jump into it. That was That's the quickest turnaround in the whole weekend, and it's because this is another critical conversation, and it's going to come straight on for the next one, and I want to take a minute to contextualize how one leads into the other. So for 10 years, I've been in the realm of helping doctors reverse chronic illness and build new models that reverse chronic illness. And what I started to see is that, it's actually talked about in the last panel, is that if you work with hyper-specialized doctors and you have extremely long appointments, what that means is that basically that care is unattainable for 70% of the population. And there's no sort of health revolution that only hits 30% of the population. It has to be a revolution. And so I wrote a book in 2019, it came out in 2020, called The Community Cure. And it was really about doing these new models of medicine in group and community. Because if you do it in group and community, you can actually make the whole thing much more affordable, much more effective. And so in this panel, we're going to be talking about new models of health and in a community setting, and how the community is actually the thing that not just makes it more efficient, but actually potentizes the whole thing by the power of peer-to-peer connection. So I've got some incredible guests here today. We've got the certified health nut, Troy Casey. A big round of applause for him. We've got Ali Baker, the other half of the Universal Health Institute. And we've got my man, Eldra Jackson here. And Eldra and I actually live close together. We're friends, and I brought him here to the Independent National Convention. And whatever you're doing, if you're having a little chat in the back, I just want you to stop for a minute and listen to the first answer to this question, because I think what you're going to hear in this answer to this first question is the power of community so profound that it could have the dramatic effect to the whole population? You be the judge. Eldra. You work inside, your organization, Inside Circle, goes inside prisons and brings men into groups. And an incredible statistic that I became aware of through your work is that out of all the men that you've served in all of the prisons, there is a 0% reoffending rate when people leave prison. How is that possible?
That is possible because we create spaces for individuals to develop a new relationship with the trauma that leads to what we call antisocial behavior, what leads to the thinking that would allow one to commit offenses. And to give a prime example, I'm not just a member, I'm a president of the club. I served 24 years of a life sentence in the California prison system. I was someone that at the age of 19, the system had already seen enough of my antics in the community. They said, he's a career criminal, get him out of here. And so I was sentenced to life plus 17 years.
Wow. And tell us about what your life looks like today.
So today, 10 years later, I am the executive director of Inside Circle, and we just came back from Holland. We spent 2 weeks training volunteers and went inside of the largest prison in that country to bring these healing circles to that space. And their intention, coming from The Hague, is to spread this work into every prison in Europe.
Can you give us an example of someone that, through your journey, who, maybe even you saw as like, this person is not going to go on the journey in the right way. It's super unlikely that this person will be able to be rehabilitated, and then now you see them in a completely different way, and what happened in that journey. Because you're an amazing example yourself, but sometimes the executive director of the group can't be seen as like a normal journey. Maybe you're just like maybe this was just like you're an exception. Can you give us an example of something that you've seen that makes you so sure that healing in community is everything?
Yeah, I've got a perfect example for you. We just wrapped up a year-long program called Project Restore Brooklyn in Bedford-Stuyvesant. And we worked with two combating organizations, two street gangs, the Hoolies and the 900s, who, according to Mock J, the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice, were responsible for the most violent crimes in their community. If you looked at the statistics, they were 20% above. We're talking about a 12 square block radius. They were 20% above the other 5 boroughs in New York, just this block of neighborhoods. We worked with them for a year. We flew out every Saturday and did these healing circles in their projects. Unbeknownst to them, we were working with both sides. And so the intention was to bring them together and have them begin sitting in these circles together and cobble together what community and health look like for them. And so we began to ask them, what would it look like for you to be willing to sit in circle with your so-called enemy? And to a man, they all said, well, they'd have to be receiving the same services that we're receiving, otherwise it won't work, because they're hurting just like we're hurting. And until they can begin to heal, peace will never work. And so we were able to bring them together. We actually brought representatives from both sides out to California, took them through an initiation rites of passage process in a California prison system, and now those two groups are working together and developing curriculums for the young kids in their neighborhoods. They're going around the high schools and working with so-called at-risk youth. Many of them now go to college, including Columbia University. And before this program started, most of them didn't even have identification cards. So that is an example of what can happen in community with this sort of work in just 12 months.
All right, I think we're done. Thanks very much. This has been the Community Health Panel. Just do this. Troy, I'd love to just get your take on that. I mean, you're taking men into community, you're working with men into community. What do you think about that story and what's possible?
Well, I think it's incredible, first and foremost, and thank you so much. I look forward to staying connected with you and your work and seeing how I can serve also. I think it's very profound what you're doing, and I think it's essential. I was incarcerated as a youth, and I know the challenges of not knowing who you are or what's going on and the deeper meaning of life. And so I appreciate you taking that to people that are incarcerated as well as communities that are threatened. And so I think that's profound. I'm a big fan already. And so, yeah, I just asked myself, how can I help in that realm? I want to get an interview with you after for my YouTube channel as well.
Tell us a little bit about why you find it important to work with men and how you've brought men into community and men into circle yourself, and what are some of the outcomes you've seen of this sort of peer-to-peer dynamic?
Well, I think that people in general are hurting, and especially, of course, men. I think the suicide rate is 4 times that of women for men, and I think it's important. Men will carry the burden silently with them. So when I do men's work, I like to keep it very simple. There's a lot of people that are into psychology and Jungian archetypes. That's not my wheelhouse. But what I have observed is if men get together and there's no females around, they can be vulnerable. The second, because I've introduced female teachers at a certain time, and men end up peacocking, right? So if the women are not around, they can be much more vulnerable. And hey, DPAK, good.
Interview. Sorry, I was late.
Yeah, good to see you. Thanks for making it.
Yeah, rock and roll.
And so it's pretty simple. Men are pretty simple. I think if you what I like to do is get them into a little bit of movement, a little bit of gentle qigong, gentle martial arts, maybe an ice bath, maybe a little bit of breath work, inhalation and exhalation. And then once we're cleared and in our bodies a little bit, light a fire and, just like our ancestors did, share around the circle. And oftentimes, one man will get something off their chest, some challenge that another man is having. And once we can get that off of our chest, we feel better and we can move on. And so we don't have to psychologically fillet them open and get very deep. It's just allowing them to share. Very, very, very simple.
Wonderful. Ali, I'd love to just ask you, I mean, you're building community now, right, around a health practice, a woman after my own heart, and I think it's super powerful value. Obviously, the majority of people have sought out treatment for alternative health in the early years were women. I think maybe intuitively they just realized what the rest of it was bunk and were willing to, to step into it. But what have you experienced in terms of creating connection and community and and how to use the power of that community to maybe accelerate people's healing journey or support people in their healing journey? I'd be interested to hear what you've come up with and how it's worked.
Thank you. I feel honored to sit in the midst of all of you and to hear your story. It just brings to light how important it is that the healing of the masculine be present. We've heard so much about the healing of the feminine and the goddess rising, and that's wonderful because the women need to have voice, not just for the women, but for the children. And so I want to back up a half hair, if I may. It looks like I co-founded the Human Universal Health Institute, but actually that was the culmination of my life's work. Mm-hmm. My life's work started in being the daughter of the CEO of the Amalgamated Sugar Company. So I grew up with more mercury fillings than most of you have ever seen. Perfect candidate for stepping into someone who was a doctor, who was like, I'm just a dentist. And I would say, great, because health and education go hand in hand. And if we don't transform education, we cannot transform health. And while we sit here as adults, I had the pleasure of starting my career in education and being witness to Waldorf education. This education model started in the early 1900s, before some of these things that we are now up against were even present. And Rudolf Steiner's work was to build the community of the children with their gifts. And that each one of us carries innately, as we heard in the last panel, this gem of our deepest truth, that soul calling that takes us through hardship to give back, or takes us through things that we don't even want to think about, the traumas that so many of us have endured. But the traumas that our children are enduring is at the root of a much deeper solution we must address. And that is, children, should not be incarcerated in school. Schools were not built to propagate a mindset of factory workers. And so you will see, that is the seed of my truth. That is where my passion comes from. Because this generation is incredible. We are waking up, but we need to transform health. And that includes the health of doctors, it includes the health of children, and it includes how do we heal collectively as individuals. Because when we heal at the individual level and become who we are, then suddenly we are able to take that even wider. So one last thing. You asked, how do you do this in a health community? It's not what you do, it's who you do it with. And people will say to me, oh, are you her boss? I'm like, are you kidding me? We have what's called the bright lights of Ha. And the bright lights of Ha are the individuals that come and bring their gifts forward and shine. And if she shines, the patients who step in, they shine. And she can show them the grace that they embody. And so I could go on, but I choose to stop in love.
Amazing. Well said. Well, look, we don't know each other very well, but I just want to share that. I enrolled my daughter into Waldorf school. It was the dream of my grandmother to have them go to Waldorf school near us. And my daughter started, she was in kindergarten and then in first grade. And in the middle of first grade was the pandemic. And by my judgment, the Waldorf school completely embarrassed themselves, completely lost connection to Steiner's principles, and went full CDC.
I experienced
100%.
that in Los Angeles.
And I have spent the last 3 years building a learning center that is very Waldorf, for my own children. Both of my daughters go there now. I didn't need another job. I didn't need to be on another board. But ultimately, we have, in Northern California now, we have health freedom. We have an incredible community. And very soon, we have charter vouchers so that this can be accessible to a wide spread of the population. And I agree with you that if it takes the level of healing that it's going to be my daughter's generation to do it, I'm here for it. Like, it has to be, there's a lot that we have to unwind. So I'm really grateful that you brought that up. And I think that, the more that I get into reading Steiner, and I've done a deep dive in the last 3 years, I think it's a man ahead of his time and predicted basically everything that happens. And if you're paying attention, you would never have done the things that we did in the last 3 years, particularly in Waldorf schools. It was horrifying. DPAK, you're here, better late than never. I would love to hear your contribution and your thoughts about healing and community and the way that you've been able to access that topic, being a musician, but also being passionate about these same topics.
Absolutely, and a lot of people don't realize my original background's in pre-med and pre-law. So, I went to school, my degrees are in neurobiology, physiology, criminology, criminal justice, and then finance. And in the middle of all that, there was also music and art happening, as well as spirituality. And at the root of my background, being Indian, was a lot of the religious, the spiritual aspect, which was a lot of rooted stuff that we know now as yoga, but it's really meditation, sahaj, samadhi, pranayama, breathing, all of these techniques that I'm blessed to have learned when I was young from being from a family of that nature. And I think that my contribution now is seeing that, hey, as an artist, self-expression is a powerful thing that's healed me. And then I'm looking at the planet as, are you guys familiar with the chakras? Have you heard of chakras? What that means? If not, basically there's these energy centers in the body that go up. And one of them is called the throat chakra, which is right here. And the throat chakra represents expression. And what I'm seeing planet-wise right now all over the earth is a haze of a suppression feeling of the throat chakra. It doesn't matter if you're an artist or not. We're talking, if you post something online, you're being censored. That's literally being suppressed. That is a suppression of your expression. It's censorship. And so beyond that, if that's happening on a mass scale, how do you think that's affecting each individual that's not fully able to express themselves? So I like to look at health as we have these different aspects. We've got our spirit, we've got our intellect and our mind, we've got our emotion, and we've got our body, right? All these different pieces, and each of them needs to experience their own type of cleanse. So for the body, I do a water fast every once in a while. I'm sure many of you guys are familiar with water fasting, and all that does is really, we're having all these inputs coming in, input, and then we're thinking, oh, I feel now sickness or whatever. We label it as sickness. I don't call it that, by the way. I just call it symptoms, and I call it purging. I just label it differently. But society's been trained to think that, ooh, something is wrong right now. Let me do more inputs. Let me take in more outside things, more medicine. And the body's very intelligent. It's actually trying to output, and it's telling you it is. It's got a fever. It's ready to purge something. And suddenly we're going, oh, we've been told something's wrong. Let me input more. And for me, my personal experience is I've just waited, and I've stopped, and I've allowed the body to tell me what it's doing and have a fever and been like, oh, I'm grateful for this message that something is trying to come out of me, and allowing it to actually do so has been my path to health freedom for myself. And going, wait a second, if what's that allegory? If you go to the doctor and they give you medicine, your cold goes away in a week. If you do nothing and stay at home, your cold goes away in a week. So why even do the other thing? Why take in the inputs? Allow it to do what it's supposed to do. It's fine, and that's a beautiful thing. So that's like all these different cleanses. So, there's the water fasting, there's the body. Then there's your mind, your intellect, what we're putting in, our thoughts. What we're taking in are more inputs. And if we're allowing ourselves to choose the negative thoughts, same thing. We're going to have a buildup. It's all different pressure cookers. There's the body pressure cooker. There's the thought pressure cooker. There's the emotional pressure cooker, which all feeds and drains from the spirit pressure cooker. And if we just realize that each of those needs its love and attention, let me focus on my thoughts and intellect and choose thoughts that are engaging me and inspiring me and empowering me. Oh, I have the sovereignty and choice to do that, and the freedom? Yes, I do. This is the Independent National Convention. We are independently able to choose whatever we want to think, and also say thank you for that little thought. I don't really need you right now. You're kind of draining me right now. Ooh, that thought's awesome. I like that. I'm going to do more of that one. And I'm going to just do that. And you can choose to retrain yourself to do that. And that helps your thought pressure cooker not get filled and stuck. But back to the throat chakra, the expression, Right now, what's happening is people are feeling suppressed, and that's building up the pressure cooker, which is turning into stress and disease, and everyone's stuck. And there's processes. There's somatic processes. There's yelling. There's screaming. And then there's music. And as an artist, I feel like if I express myself through voice, I'm now releasing emotion that needed to be released that could have turned also into disease and acid in the body. Our cortisol goes up, stress goes up, leads to disease, leads to acid, leads to cancer, leads to all the things. We've proven now scientifically that if you literally eliminate most of your stress, you will literally take care of most of it, and then whatever's left, we can deal with the body and the diet and the getting better water and all that kind of stuff. So that's my summary on that.
Yeah, I love that. Eldra, I want to just bring what he just said to you there. Yeah, because in my experience of being in a men's group now and being part of this for the last 5 years and seeing that, I think a lot of what's going on there in the group is that people have not had men particularly have not had a safe way to express themselves. And I would just love for you to share, like, you know, does that resonate with you? And then what have you found as a way of creating the safety for men to say the things that they haven't been able to say, and what the health effects of that are?
Yeah, thank you for the question, and everything that you said definitely resonates. And in my experience, yes, you know, you asked about men, but people habitually, unfortunately, in our culture and in our society, do not feel like they have a voice and feel choked down and feel constricted and incarcerated. You know, I talked about the inception of Inside Circle and it starting inside of a physical prison, but in my experience, because we do this globally now, people are incarcerated. I was incarcerated inside of myself long before I ever had a pair of manacles put on my wrist. And that came from trauma that I had experienced as a child. And that little child formatted inside of himself ways to deal with that trauma, defense mechanisms, so that my little mind wouldn't break. And I didn't know how to express that. I didn't know how to articulate that. And so as I grew into the body of a man, that little 7-year-old boy was still driving the bus. He was still in control because he was afraid. He was scared and he didn't know how to speak. And that man didn't know how to say, I'm afraid, I'm sad. That man knows how to say, I'm pissed off. And he knows how to act from that place as a part of that defense mechanism to strike out and lash out as that young boy. And so creating spaces where people can go back and revisit, not be re-traumatized, but develop a new relationship with the trauma, not to make it go away, but to develop a new relationship. The grown man in me can go back and find that little boy, let him know that he's okay, give him a voice, and then bring him back in my safe place. Prisons are full of individuals who don't have that voice, who have never had that voice, who have never had someone ask them. They're always asked the question, what's wrong with you? Why did you do that? Nobody ever asked, what happened? Nobody ever asked, what's your medicine? What is your magic? And create the space for people to begin to identify and articulate what that specialness is that they bring into the world. Once I'm able to access that and articulate and speak to that, then I have a responsibility to live from that place. I'm not a very special and unique individual as far as this work goes. I consider myself to be middle of the pack. There are thousands, millions of people just like me. I just happen to be the face of the movement. I just happen to be the voice.
Well, if you want to learn more about Eldra, I would highly recommend, there's a movie on Netflix called The Work. You can find it, and that is basically the story of Eldra and the story of Inside Circle. Highly recommend it. I want to just talk a little bit about something you said there that I think is critical, is that, you know, when you have the beauty of a man doing their work is one thing, but the beauty of a man doing their work in Circle is such an exponential increase in the value of it. You know, we have a phrase in the group which said, like, your work is my work, right? It's one thing for a man to do work, but to do a man to work in a trusting container where other people can do it and experience it, it's almost like creating safety for everyone else to be able to do their work, but also it's like sometimes it can be you're actually like feeling it yourself and getting almost the same value even if you're not like in the hot seat. And you know, one of the things that I wanted to just bring here in the theme of healing in community is that we need structures that that make it easier for the next person to do it. Like so many people who have healed, and you know, we heard in the last panel, it's been very hard to reverse your chronic illness. And my hope is that each next person, it's easier and easier. And the only way that that's possible is if social norms change. And you know, Troy, I know you're doing a lot to like change the social norms of what health is, but I think we need these kind of containers because you know, one man's work can make it exponentially easier for the next man, and ultimately, like, it's going to take an exponential solution to the to the problems that we have. And Troy, I'd love to like bring you into this because I just know you know, you care deeply about this happening, you know, at a scale that's meaningful. And I'd love to get your thoughts on, you know, how you feel like the community container can make it easier for the next person to go on the same journey that maybe you went on.
Well, I think it's a good idea to recognize that we're all one or none, right? We're all connected. We're in symbiotic relationship with each other, the earth, the species, and all of us. And so no one's free until we're all free. I believe that the debt slave system, the fake fiat currencies, the petrodollar, the proxy wars subsequent because of that, the oil top-down oligarchy that we live in, intertwined with petrochemical byproducts and pharmaceutical drugs, agribusiness. The industries are set up and then the media controls it and just kind of says, oh, that's always the way it is. We see this inverted truth on the media now, and then we see this mini Hunger Games that we have going on right now, and this competition. And so ultimately, I like what Greg Braden was talking about, that species evolve when they have more life, and how they evolve is by cooperating, pooling resources. And so I think it's very important, and you know, people are pretty extended these days because of the fake economy. I think housing prices are up 43% just since the last 4 years. And you know, this is a globalist movement, right? These aren't politicians that are working for the United States government that have been co-opted by corporations. These are multinational corporations that have been co-opted by the globalists to control everything. And right? Let's call a spade a spade. They'll try and censor me online, but this is the truth, and we all know it in our heart of hearts. And so having that tough conversation with people instead of getting caught in the red-blue divide, the black-white, male, female. They have tried every trick in the book, the divide and conquer Marxist Communist Manifesto. This is about absolute control. Once you have all the greed and the money, then it's about power. And so it's really just standing up in the face of power. So once you've got your resources taken care of, you can feed yourself, and you know how to do self-care education like Allie was talking about. You know that the body needs to move, the body needs to sleep, the body needs pure food, the body needs pure water. These are fundamental principles. These are all non-negotiables. That's why I advocate for self-care education, self-love. Loving yourself with these non-negotiables is very important. A lot of research on circadian rhythms, et cetera. Knowing these fundamentally allows you to build up the vitality and the life force energy inside of you, so you naturally radiate that energy to the next person, and it's very attractive. And so once we're illuminated to a certain degree, and someone has a good program that I can work with, I can collaborate with someone like DPAK, and I've been connected. All his work on Plandemic is very commendable, and then he's connected to Mickey Willis, who also woke up during this whole political structure. Plandemic 3, I do believe, had his whole movement towards Bernie, and he was disillusioned as well. And so we're all going through this wake up. And so however many people that you can align with the time availability and the resources, once you take care of your real estate, then you go out and you see where else you can connect with other people that have programs, services, ideas that they're moving forward. However you can spread that in the movement. And sometimes, you know, individuals have their own gifts. They could contribute to maybe cooking for his event, Or maybe he's got an event in Washington, D.C. next week. You know, how can we help promote this and what they're doing? I'm in California for an event, but I will do my best to promote everything that they're doing. And so it's really using our gifts, and this is what I'm calling for, is the gift economy, one of the 4 major solutions on my, if you haven't heard, you know, every time the circus comes to town, I run my own platform. So I've nominated myself for president of planet Earth. And I've been doing this every time the circus comes to town for the last 12 years so far. I started in before 2016, and so the bottom line is the gift economy is one way we can share our own natural gifts. Self-care education is at the cornerstone of that. I'm advocating for free energy, Tesla technology, zero-point technology, harnessing the natural energy that we have, wireless technology, without harming human beings or other species. And we can do this no different from the Wright brothers wanting to fly like an eagle, or Steve Jobs putting a handheld computer in every man's hand, whatever the mind can conceive and believe it can achieve. And then finally, permaculture, which is what Zach Bush is all about. We are the environment. We are the earth. Our gut microbiome is directly related to the rhizome of the soil, and that deep connection. I believe these 4 things can heal the planet. That's my President of Planet Earth campaign. And so at the cornerstone of that is this cooperation, however you can, once you turn on your lights inside of your vessel.
Thank you. Beautifully said. I just want to push on you here a minute there, because, like, why don't you run?
Because I don't believe in the political structure. It's rotten to the core. And I'm a Buckminster Fuller fan. He says that you don't fight the existing systems. All the revolutions in the world have been fought. And is it Public Enemy? I think it was Scott Heron. He said the revolution will not be televised, but the evolution will be digitized. And we're witnessing that right now on social media. Social media is an incredible tool. We have 2 forces that are guiding everything: yin, yang, inhalation, exhalation, catabolic, anabolic, masculine, feminine. And so Luke Skywalker needs a Darth Vader, right? And all the ancient sages have said, walk the middle path. So this is all about balance and walking the middle path, or the razor's edge, knowing that we are living in a dualistic paradox. So how can we balance these things and harmonize within nature? Right, not go against it or go against the existing system. So Buckminster Fuller said, you don't fight the existing systems, you design the future, and that's gonna fall away to the wayside, right? Let's go this way, baby. I know DPAK's on that.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
that's what it
totally.
is.
I want to give an example of what you just shared in action. So just to give some context for people here. So, you know, many of you, and if you follow these people, you would know that, like, type 2 diabetes is reversible, right? Everyone knows that, right? You can reverse it with lifestyle. And there's a doctor in the UK called Dr. David Unwin who came to that conclusion because he did it in himself. And he's just a regular GP working in his office and thinking to himself, well, there's a lot of people in my clinic who are coming in with type 2 diabetes. How are we going to solve this? Because I'm not sure if I can do it one person by one person. So he then enlisted his wife, who's a psychologist, and they started having type 2 diabetes reversal groups on Thursday nights. And any patients were available to come. They were all welcomed, and they came in, and that was the beginning of the process. You can now look, that he was 2016 Innovator of the Year in the NHS, and you can actually now see the outcomes of what's happened in his clinic over the next 7 years in the British Medical Journal, because he documented it. But long story short, half the people who came to those evening groups reversed their type 2 diabetes, right? So this happened at a meaningful scale, and it was only done by changing what they eat and having this community connection. And the impact of that many people in his practice, hundreds of people reversing their type 2 diabetes, meant that if you looked at the amount of diabetes medication spent in clinic by clinic by clinic by clinic across clinics that are similar to his, it was essentially like a half or a third. And anyone who's in medicine also knows that if you reverse their type 2 diabetes, it's not just difference in the cost of diabetes medication, because people who have type 2 diabetes also have fatty liver disease and anxiety and depression. There's a whole host of things that happen from there. So I just want to, share the elegance of how easy that is to do. And yet, that's not mainstream in the UK. Every other GP practice didn't take that on and do it. Type 2 diabetes has not been reversed at any reasonable scale in the UK. But there are examples like that that show when one person sees the truth and knows the truth and uses community as the conduit for scale, you have a significant potential for transformation. And there are examples like that in many different disease categories, in many different ways here in the US. Ultimately, what it takes, though, is it takes someone at the middle of it to have do enough emotional labor to first of all execute it at a reasonable scale, and then work out how to take it to the next level. And you've seen that, by like an example like Dean Ornish, where for 30 years he's proven that you can reverse heart disease with diet, and has spent 30 years taking love and connection and many things into the mainstream, and even having Medicare pay for it, which is what it takes to really take it to the next level. So I
think you're seeing this also with Del Bigtree and Bobby Kennedy. Their ideas are being furthered and scooped up by the people as well, especially with them utilizing the media. So I get what you're saying with Dr. Dean Ornish, but also the adoption of ideas and speaking them into existence. And I think those gentlemen have done incredible work as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You want to jump in on that thought about what's possible?
Yes, I do. And one of the reasons I do is because I want to come back to Waldorf education. Because when you were asked, why don't you run for office? Well, when I was in Waldorf education, I looked at it and said, uh-oh, they're going to try to harden a living education and make it dogma. And it became the precipice of my own change. And I started working on an educational model called HUE, Human Universal Education. Because inside of Steiner's work are answers to health. And in the same way, we watch the corruption enter education at the private level, leaving all of the other children who can't afford to go to a private school in circumstances that don't allow for the kind of national, international transformation we need around health and education. And so you speak of male suicide. I survived male suicide of my former husband. And when he passed, he said to my son, I am leaving you my most valuable asset, my Steiner library. Because deep in this wisdom is where I sat in healthcare. I traveled with John. I sat before I came, and give me just a moment if you would, please. I was in Miami, Om Namah Shivaya, breath work, breathing in love, light, and I asked the question, how can I best serve? And I was called to Denver, and I met John, and I was like, whoa, really? He's really handsome, this is gonna be hard, right? And I said, okay, I accept the calling. But what I quickly realized is that the only way we can change healthcare is if we start to educate people in the common language of it. And the problem is, there is a hidden language behind medicine and behind dentistry that keeps all of you hostage in your own health. And the moment I started sitting, I was like, wait, hold on a minute. I'm educated. I've got a master's degree. I know education. I know international things. I know things. But I was like, well, it doesn't really matter. You're just a person. I was like, well, wait a second. Isn't that what we all are? So I started to listen and listen and listen. And all of a sudden it came clear. This mouth that is connected to this body, this microbiome that we hear so much of, as John pointed out, it starts here. But the deeper truth is there are certain species that can only be invited back to form the etheric body that is the body that makes up who we are in light consciousness, not just biology. And so when we come to this realization that the same way Waldorf education fell into hardening, instead of the keeping it alive, keeping it awake, keeping it moving, changing it, that's why I went, wait, I'm going to start a new educational program. It's called HUE, Human Universal Education. Then I met John. I was like, wait, you can't have education without health. And you can't have either one without freeing the people. But you can't free the people if you keep poisoning them. And the way we are poisoning the people, whether it's glyphosate, whether it's 5G, whether it's mercury fillings in the mouths of children who can't afford a dentist, because dentistry is seen as this solution upstairs on the brain trough of the children being educated. How can they be, right? So while I sit with you all seeking solutions for change, the greatest change has to keep in keeping things alive. And once you get the wisdom, you have to transform it in your own knowing. Because people get information, they harden it, and then everything freezes, and then we have the duopoly having a great time playing off of our centers.
Yeah.
So when I speak, I know that there is wisdom in these teachings that were here in the early 1900s, when the time when Rockefeller medicine and pleomorphism split road, change the conditions or the conditions will change you. And that includes the conditions of our political environment, our educational environment, our healthcare system. We built one, and now it's time to give it back to the earth, because we need to rise. And if we try to hold on to things that are meant to be let go of, that's when things harden. So thank you for listening.
Yeah.
And that's it.
I mean, I really appreciate what you're saying. I think what needs to happen, and there are some people who are doing this, but I think what Marianne Williamson did for A Course of Miracles, I would love to see a bunch of people do for Rudolf Steiner, because to turn it into like today's information and bring it locally, there are some people online who are getting it, but Steiner is kind of tough to read, right? It's tough to get into, but it's certainly, there's so much wisdom in there. DPAK, I'd love to, you mentioned here with the poisoning, you were just talking about being poisoned. You've literally been in the business of sort of educating people about their own poisoning. And I'd just love to kind of, obviously I saw The Pandemic, the musical last night. It's awesome. I love some of the cameos there. I'd just love to get your lessons that you've learned on what are some of the best ways to give people information that maybe they're not incentivized to want to learn about themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And just touching on a couple of things that were just said too, I think duality was coming up in multiple themes, Troy. And it's really seeing that we are the spirit we are the Holy Ghost inside of it. And duality is just, it's natural. Like duality is a part of nature. There's plants, there's female, male, and all that. But inside of that still is infinite. It is that one. And if we transcend that, then it's not like we're anti-duality. We're just not stuck in duality. So we can observe it and then be the observer of it. And that's where we got into what you were talking about with balance, is that's Shiva and Shakti. That's, just said Om Namah Shivaya. All of these just got tied together so beautifully that Shiva represents the divine cosmic dance. And it's on one foot, on the Nataraja. Om Namah Shivaya, right? And it's basically the balance between permanent and impermanent. Permanent and impermanent. Because the impermanent is the spirit, and the permanent is this thing, this body, this vessel, which is temporary, which is always going to fade away. So back to your question, which everything ties beautifully, is thinking about all of it from the perspective of, how can the message be shared in a way that's going to be received more is by transcending the duality of the message. So maybe we need a documentary, which is a little bit more serious. We have the Pandemic documentaries, they're a little more serious, but it's necessary. It has the information in it. But then we also need some art to go with it. That's why we did the musical. So we can loosen people up into the heart a little bit. That's, again, the transcending of the duality. We got the left brain, we got the right brain, we got the logic, and we got the emotion. We got the heart opening up with the vibration of the songs And these songs are movements. Heal the World, Michael Jackson, was a movement. We Are the World, Live Aid, these are movements. And he was referring to an event I'm doing next week called Rescue the Republic. You guys familiar with that? Woo! So I'm headlining an event called Rescue the Republic along with Jordan Peterson and Tulsi Gabbard and RFK and a lot of amazing people. Go to jointheresistance.org or go to my website, dpakworld.com, and all of it's there. And again, that's the same thing. We're going to have different ways of delivering the message that can be received. And so you'll have people speaking, but you'll also have musicians. And you'll also have people, Russell Brand is probably going to tap into, he and I are going to lead a meditation together, Russell and I. And we're going to co-lead a beautiful meditation that'll drop everyone into their heart. But then we'll have some powerful speakers come out, and they're going to be rallying. Del Bigtree's going to be speaking, and you know how he talks. He's going to yell and get you guys all pumped up and scream in your face about how free you are, right? And then someone else is going to be like, talking very softly and slowly. And I think the message just needs to be delivered in as many ways as possible, like he was just saying. Let's all share each other's stuff. He's gonna come on with his style. I'm gonna come in with my rock star kind of vibe and sing the songs to you, and then suddenly start nerding out, like hyper speak like Ben Shapiro style about outsourcing your authority and being how we're all sovereign beings and the government's a bunch of bullshit, right? He just said, he and I agree about the same thing. Like, we are the government. We are each president of planet Earth. All of us. We are each. He's saying that because he's calling it for himself. He's not saying it that saying it over you. He's saying it for himself and hinting that everyone gets to say that for themselves. That's the empowerment message. That's how you deliver the message of health and empowerment, is saying, hey, I'm healthy. Not look at me, I'm healthy, but I'm healthy and you can do it too. And here are some cool ways, and there might be contradictory ways. Someone might be like, here's carnivore over here, and someone might be like, here's sprouts over here, and you might need to find what resonates with you. And everyone's arguing about which one's better, and we can get into all these health debates about this and that, but guess what? Mine's working and I'm plant-based. And my other dude last night I was hanging out with is working too. And he's full on like carnivore, eating organs all the time in my face. And it's okay. And I'm cool with that. You know what I mean? I'm like, cool, I'm gonna sing you a song about sprouts and you're gonna be like, you know what I'm saying? It's gonna be fine. We're all gonna be fine. But the thing is, it's about taking the power back. It's about choosing to say, I'm going to be the pilot of my vessel, and that means now I'm not a victim of this authority system of systems of governments and news and media that's brainwashing and NLPing us on what you're supposed to do and stay inside, which makes zero sense, right? We just talked about that. Stay inside and isolate yourself during a lockdown when you're sick. No, you mean that's like psychologically going to make you sick because you're not around people and you're now not in the sun and you're not breathing air. You're supposed to literally do all of those things, actually, not the opposite. And so the last 4 years was a great wake-up call for a lot of people. And if you see the Join the Resistance, there's a video Mickey Willis just put out that I just showed him last night that just came out literally yesterday that already went viral that talks about that 2020 was the year, 2020 vision, right, was an awakening year. A lot of people got the vision in 2020 that may not have been looking at it the same, like, oh, I've been kind of understanding that there's something, or that's a conspiracy theory. Whatever it was, a lot of new people just jumped on the ship in 2020, and the more people are all aboard the individual personal sovereignty train right now, and we're all here together for this weekend, or this week, or whatever the hell day it is, for that purpose. And you know what I'm saying? And that's the vibe right there. So that's what I would say is, in terms of getting the message out, every type of way possible: nerdy, cool; quiet, loud. I just did that opposite, by the way. Musical, whatever it is. Media, videos. Mickey Willis is making these movies. They're powerful because they're done in quality media. Someone else gives a talk. That's great. I say all of the above.
Awesome. Thank you, DPAK. You want to finish it?
Yeah. Bravo. And yeah, whatever it takes for an individual, I do have a mandate from the fellas inside. And this being the Independent National Convention, a lot of what I've been hearing here is about the two-party system and how do we change that, and it doesn't work. And for me, to break it down simply, the movement that began inside, it was born out of a race riot in 1996. And for those who are not familiar with what prison environments can look like, they're hyper-segregated. They're hyper-violent, they're hyper-sectioned, kind of like the political system today, where you have sides. And you have to pick a side, and you have to choose a side, and oftentimes you're given a side. When you come into the California prison system, you're either black, you're white, you're Mexican, and if you don't fall into one of those three, you're what they call other. And you stick with your fucking group, period, or it can cost you your life. When these circles began, it came out of a riot in 1996, a racial riot that was allowed to go on for 40 minutes before the governor said, start shooting to end that. The first circles were held in 1997. I got on that yard in 2000. For the entire 10 years that I was on that yard, there were no incidents across racial lines because that system no longer worked for us. The system is the people. The system has as much power as we choose to give it. When we chose to stop tripping across race lines, across gang lines, across religious lines, and stop stabbing one another because you happen to be born in Southern California and I happen to be born in Northern California, the system altered. The culture changed. So why are we here today? Why are we at the Independent National Convention? If we folks who were inside, who had been cast away as the undesirables, could figure out a way, not believing, I never thought I was gonna get out. Life plus 17 years means you're going to die here. If we can figure out how to begin to heal and how to change the systems with machine guns pointed at us, what the fuck are we doing here?
Woo! That's it. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being part of our panels here today. I'd like to thank Eldra Jackson. Big round of applause for Eldra, Ali, Troy, and DPAK. Powerful messages for you to take back into your community. There's a new standard of care in health. There's a new model, and that's community and bringing them together. That's the future. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your conference.
Thank you, guys.